Hello, everyone. This is a discussion intended for Psych 105N with the topic of internal regulation. So this video will be divided into subtopics, namely the temperature regulation, thirst, and hunger. So I believe that I've already provided the concept notes regarding this topic, and I hope that you've already read them. And I also expect everyone to do additional readings and research aside from the reference that I've provided. Now we will be talking first about what temperature regulation is all about. Now it started with observing animals on how they act based on the different temperatures they are experiencing. An example here is if you have watched and noticed that these migratory birds fly only during at night. The reason for that is when they fly during midday, their bodies cannot tolerate the heat, and this can result into heat stroke. Now, if we incorporate it into human beings, the temperature also affects how we behave. And most of the time, we tend to overlook it. Now, our bodies are being regulated and consistently seek to maintain stability. The body undergoes to maintain a stable state and resist change, and that is homeostasis. So, what is an example of homeostasis? A great example here is that the regulation of body temperature. So, in a human body, the normal body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. So, if you sense that your body is hot, your brain, specifically your hypothalamus, senses it and signals your sweat glands to make you sweat and cool you off. So when the hypothalamus senses that you're too cold, then it sends signals to your muscles that make you shiver and create warmth. So you see the point here, our bodies seek to maintain homeostasis. And by doing that, we experience changes in our behavior or actions, no? And that includes sweating or shivering. On the other hand, allostasis, no, is the process that anticipates future needs. So it is the process by which the body responds to stressors to regain homeostasis. An example here is if when you sense, no, if there's a sign of danger or provokes, no, a sudden increase in your heart rate, your blood pressure, and sweating, and that prepares your body for vigorous activity. So in allostasis, it is an adaptive way in which the body anticipates needs depending on the situation. So the organism has its ways of controlling its body temperature. The amphibians, reptiles, and most of the fish are ectothermic, meaning that they depend on external sources for body heat instead of generating it themselves. So if an organism uses energy to regulate its body temperature internally, then it is considered endothermic. So mammals, including us human beings and birds, are considered to be endothermic. Again, for endotherms, mammals and birds can maintain internal homeostasis regardless of the external environmental temperature. So even though we are exposed to winter or summer temperatures, human beings can maintain an internal body temperature around 37 degrees Celsius, since that is the average body temperature of a person. Now, if you are wondering what will happen to ectotherms, no, the ectothermic organisms like the amphibians and reptiles, how can they survive despite being cold-blooded? So in order for the ectotherms to survive, since these organisms rely on the environment for body temperature regulations, if they want to increase their body temperature, they would stay under the sun. Or if they need to cool down, then they would seek shade to cool their bodies. So these are physical interactions with the environment, since the ectothermic organism cannot rely on physiological processes like the endotherms. Know that we as human beings, as mammals, no, we are capable of sweating and shivering, unlike the ectotherms. Now, let's also talk about fever, which also I included on your concept notes. So, we considered someone having a fever if the person's body temperature is higher than 37 degrees Celsius. So, if we are experiencing fever, typically our bodies will shiver or sweat. No, so these responses that we experience when we have a fever are caused by the hypothalamus, which enables and directs the body to do it. So having a moderate fever is a good response to our bodies. Why? Because when our body temperature is high, we can combat certain bacteria to grow inside our bodies, since some of these bacteria cannot tolerate living in high temperatures. But then, of course, we need to take into consideration that if a fever is higher than 39 degrees Celsius or higher than like 41 degrees Celsius, then it's a life-threatening situation. And that needs and requires medical attention. Now, let's talk about thirst. Okay, so water is so vital to human beings, since this constitutes about 70% of our bodies. The need to maintain the water in our bodies and have enough fluids in the circulatory system is a must to survive. We could survive for days, maybe weeks without food, but not long without water. Okay, so water is essential for us. Now, humans have a strategy in maintaining water inside our bodies. We have vasopressin, it also known as antidiuretic hormone or ADH. So the most important effect of the antidiuretic hormone is to conserve body water by reducing the loss of water in urine. So when we are sleeping, there's an increased release of vasopressin, and this is an excellent example, no, if why we can get through the night sleeping without the urge to urinate, is that is because of the help of vasopressin or ADH. No, because the vasopressin help us decrease urination, and its effect is that there's an increase in thirst. Why is there an increase of thirst? Because the release of vasopressin enables the kidneys to reabsorb water from urine and therefore make the urine more concentrated. So if your urine is more concentrated, then the thirstier you become. Okay, so we distinguish two types of thirst. So eating salty foods causes osmotic thirst, and losing fluid by bleeding or sweating induces hypovolemic thirst. Okay, so osmotic thirst is a drive for water that helps restore the normal state. So when eating salty foods, the concentration of salts and minerals in your blood becomes elevated. That's why you need to normalize these high salt levels by drinking water. On the other hand, hypovolemic thirst needs to restore lost salts and not just like plain water. We usually experience that when we do an intense workout or exercise, for example. That's why there are moments that plain water is not enough to know if when you are doing extensive physical activity. So we would suggest, or would like to get like a Gatorade drink wherein it can rehydrate and replenish the electrolytes and minerals essentials for the body's functions. Okay, now the following discussion will be hunger. Okay, so part also for human survival is to eat food. So we get various nutrients from the kind of food that we eat. So I've already provided the diagram of the human digestive system. Of course, the digestion first occurs in the mouth, where the saliva breaks down the food, and then the swallowed food will travel down to the esophagus, then to the stomach. So the stomach stores food for a time, and then it releases food to the small intestine, wherein it can digest proteins, fats, and carbohydrates needed in our bodies. The large intestine absorbs water and minerals and lubricates the remaining materials to pass as feces. Okay, so did you know a little bit of trivia? No? Did you know that most adults cannot tolerate large amounts of milk? Now, these are common to Asians because we lack the gene that enables us to metabolize lactose. So these are people that have lactose intolerance. So meaning, if you have lactose intolerance, if you consume certain amounts of milk, then you will suffer like cramps or gas pains. Okay. Our brain helps us to decide whether we need to eat or how much food we should consume. So it signals the body if we're already full or not. So the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus has one set of neurons sensitive to hunger that signals, and a second set sensitive to satiety signals. When you say satiety, it means that it can signal the body that it's already full. Okay. The lateral hypothalamus controls insulin secretion, alters taste responsiveness, and facilitates feeding in other ways. So there was a study conducted wherein those animals with a damaged lateral hypothalamus, they refuse to eat food or drink water. On the other hand, the ventromedial hypothalamus is responsible for inhibiting us from eating. So if you have a damaged ventromedial hypothalamus, then there's a high possibility that you will lead into obesity, no, overeating, and weight gain. Okay. Now let's identify some eating disorders. So one of this is bulimia nervosa. So bulimia nervosa is a condition in which people alternate between binges of overeating and periods of strict dieting. Many, but not all, induce themselves to vomit. On average, people with bulimia nervosa show a variety of biochemical abnormalities, including an increased production of ghrelin. So, a ghrelin is a hormone associated with increased appetite. On the other hand, this is also another an eating disorder. This is anorexia nervosa. So anorexia nervosa is characterized by a refusal to eat enough to maintain healthy body weight. In some cases, it becomes life-threatening. No, anorexia occurs in about 1% of women and 1/3% of men, with onset in the teenage years or early 20s, and generally for a long persistence. So people with anorexia do not regard food as tasting bad, but instead they express an exaggerated fear of growing fat because uh, they think or they believe that when they eat that kind of food, no, they believe that they'll get fat. Okay, so when they eat, they prefer or strongly prefer to have a low fat and low calorie foods. Okay, so that's all about internal regulation, wherein we divided the discussions into three parts. Again, temperature regulation, thirst, and hunger. Again, I hope that with this short summarized discussion video that I had, you were able to understand the topics that I have presented a while ago. Okay, so again, I hope that you have read the concept notes and had your supplemental readings regarding this topic. If you have questions or clarifications, you may contact me on my UB Facebook account. Okay, so thank you again for listening and have a great day ahead.